I understand my task. I hope that I understand it correctly. First of all, I think it's to begin with a broad framing of our task over these couple of days. And let me just stipulate up front that my understanding of what we're gathered here to do is to explore the path of Christian discipleship in some very specific ways. Now, I know that's not the label that everybody's marching under, as it were. But here's the deal. As Atala Shabazz put it, that's the oldest daughter of Malcolm X, she put it some years ago, the truth of the matter is that we're all disciples of something. Right? I mean, we are. I'm not talking about how we think or how we feel, but we're all living our life in some particular way. We're spending our life energy. We're handling money in some way. We're dealing with food in some way. We're working in some fashion. We're inhabiting some particular space. So I don't want the discipleship word to throw you off, because we are all, in fact, disciples of something, our convictions, and how they guide our life. So if you claim the Christian tradition as you come into this circle, which I think is probably most of you, then we want to invite you to be part of a deepening of your discipleship in that tradition. If you don't claim the Christian path, then we want to offer a double invitation. One is to listen in as we Christians try to do our work, and secondly, to be in conversation with us, help us see things more clearly, and maybe even see if you find resonance and even inspiration for your own work. So that's what I think we're about. Now, just to set the record straight, we are, most of us here, I think, trying to move on beyond the more simplistic understandings of faith in the Christian tradition, particularly in this country. These include the tradition of decisionism, the sort of once and for all existential salvation experience that demands nothing more from us. That would be some of us low church Baptist types. We're trying to also move past toxic dogmatism, that much maligned tradition of constantly needing to prove ourselves right and other people wrong. And I think a whole lot of us are trying to move past denominationalism, that distinctly American form of culture religion. Now, that's not to say that there are not some aspects of these understandings that we don't embrace, only that we're reaching for something deeper, something hopefully approximating discipleship in the way of Jesus, the Nazarene who lived and died in the tradition of the wilderness prophets, who worked as a healer and a liberator, died as a resistor and a dissident, and was raised in a divine insurrection against the rule of death over history. So let's just not waste our time bagging on poor old domesticated imperial Jesus. He's not here. The one who obsesses about sex, shrugs at nuclear weapons, and endorses business as usual in the Mammon system. I like how Brian McLaren puts it, the popular and domesticated Jesus has become little more than a chrome-plated hood ornament on the guzzling Hummer of Western civilization. That pretty much sums that up. That's not the conversation we're having here. The sector of the movement gathered here is what I call the radical discipleship current of Christianity. That's not a particularly popular brand these days. A lot of people call it something else. That's how I came up thinking of it. And this simply means concentrating on the roots of things, both of what's wrong and of what's right. And that means struggling to address the root causes of our historic crisis, not just the symptoms, which takes courage in a culture that is forever trying to make over its contradictions with cosmetic solutions that don't ask too much or do too much. But it also means returning to the roots of our faith, which is all about rediscovering the Jesus who was no patron of empire, who lived and died with the poor, and who envisioned the renewal of everything. It is my conviction, and I think my elders in the room would share this, that what we're interested here is, we're interested in what you're doing right now, but we're more interested in what you're going to be doing in 20 years. In other words, we're really interested in building a long-term movement of resistance. And we understand from our own experience that unless we are rooted in deep traditions, then we're going to inevitably be distracted by the delusions of our culture, paralyzed by despair or denial, blown away by the storm that is our present crisis. So I think that's what we're trying to do here, more or less, as a broad framing. Am I in the ballpark, Jay? Now, what about this business of the unhewn stones? And Jay, you want to say where these beautiful stones are from here?
Sure. Yeah, our stones on the altar there are from the Wissahickon Creek, which is where a lot of times a certain community does our baptisms at. It's down in Fairmount.
You're here to participate in what I think is one of the most interesting and most radical, in the sense of going to the roots, conversations currently going on in the discipleship movement in this country. It's a conversation that seeks to go deeper in our analysis of our present situation. A terrain obviously dominated by social injustice, historical contradictions, and what our tradition calls sin. For the moment, let me characterize the conversation we're trying to have as practicing in the tradition of the unhewn stone, which of course is serving as the overall rubric for this gathering. Now, this tradition has its roots in what we might call the 11th commandment. This text from Exodus 20 is, of course, not an 11th commandment, but it's a reiteration and thus an underlining of the second commandment, namely the prohibition of idolatry. Idolatry concerns every human attempt to fetishize or overvalue or absolutize that which we make. It's pretty simple. That is idolatry in Scripture. According to Torah, our tools, our advanced technology, our industry cannot mediate the source of life. Can't. Nothing that we engineer is sacred. And that includes our grandest project of all, civilization itself. How this is said is, when you want to worship, when you do ceremony, take a rock, or by extension a tree, or a lake, or a river, or a mountain. That's the place to worship. But don't imagine that you can improve it. Not with one of your tools. If you put a chisel on this stone, you will profane it. This is perhaps one of the most ancient traditions in our Scripture. It goes way, 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 way back, as Van Morrison would put it. So that's a little old school for y'all, isn't it? But it's at the heart of the radical tradition that we want to explore this weekend. The text, I think, means quite simply that we need nothing manufactured to help us commune with the Creator. Now, this is old wisdom that's reflected in countless indigenous cultures across the globe and across time. It is we moderns who have forgotten it, imagining that we honor the Creator in built spaces, whether grand and gilded or plain and functional. The tradition of the unhewn stone represents shorthand for what we're going to be calling this weekend loosely the primitivist perspective on the world and on civilization and on our faith. We will be specifically looking at the biblical expressions of primitivism, such as this verse from Job, in which God, perhaps surprisingly to some of you, invites us to ally ourselves with all of the animate and inanimate beings of creation. Charlene, are you here? You. Charlita. She hasn't made it yet. Anyway, she really wanted this verse to get some airtime, so here it is. This is a great text from Job. Do not live in fear. Lash yourself with the rocks. I like that. In the Bible, the tradition of the unhewn stone is a witness for the Creator and the creation, and against all forms of civilization that seek to re-engineer the world into our image. This is a radical tradition that has long been marginalized in our churches and synagogues, yet it is being rediscovered today by, well, by some of us who are trying to respond to the crisis of this historical moment. So that's sort of the theme that we're trying to explore now. As we try to unpack this business of unhewn stone theology and practice, let me attempt to use, with some trepidation in the presence of Salters people, use the metaphor of a bus trip. You know, like a biodiesel bus trip. You guys are probably really over that by now, but anyway, it's a really cool idea. Anyway, this particular bus of the unhewn stone movement has been bumping around for a while, and it's been gaining a little bit of attention. It's been covering a little bit of ground. Now, some folk here are really jonesing to open up this clunker, this old bus, see what she can do, put the pedal to the metal. Where are you, Andy? Yeah, Andy Lewis. I mean, he wants to get it on, you know. And I love that about Andy. But my understanding of this particular gathering is that this conference is more like a series of bus stops. We're going to be slowing down, opening some doors so folk who are interested can get in, get on. And so that means that in the first talks I want to give, you know, these are pretty familiar bus stops for some of the folks in the room, but I just want to invite you to be patient because it turns out, Andy, there's still lots of empty seats on the bus, have you noticed? So we want us to open this thing up and invite people on. In the third talk tomorrow, I want to take the bus on a little spin around the block. And in the last talk, I'm interested in stopping the bus, getting off, walking around the bus, kicking some tires, and seeing whether actually this old bus really can carry us where we need to go. So sort of a number of levels of engagement, and I hope that's appropriate because I know that y'all are coming at this from a really different perspective. For some of you, this is brand new stuff, and it's really weird, and it's about to get weirder. For some of you, you've been riding this bus for a while, and you know you're looking for some open highway. So anyway, let's get down to work. I want to turn to the crisis briefly. This is not meant to persuade this group, but more to remind us. And also to remind us that this is a necessary starting point for any conversation about the tradition of the unhewn stone. If we don't get this, nothing we say this weekend is going to make any sense. So this is the beginning of the conversation, that until and unless we grasp that our civilization has backed itself into a historical dead end, this conversation is going to seem really sort of goofy and foolish. Our way of life has been unmasked as Derek Jensen calls it, an endgame. I think he's right about that. It's an ecological crisis that has been stalking us for centuries and which is now upon us.